I'm the rootinest, tootinest, rip-rootinest, price-cuttingest, YouTubingest drinks man on the internet, and I'm here to tell you about everything that Red Dead Redemption 2 gets wrong about drinking in the Wild West. Yee-hoo! Well, howdy, partners. Sit a spell, let me jaw at you a bit. I gotta talk to you about Red Dead Redemption 2, and some bees have gotten my bonnet about it because, hoo boy, they get some things wrong about Wild West drinking. And to be fair, I really should be fair here, these are mostly problems that you're gonna find across the entire Western genre. The entire field of movies and books and TV shows are just filled to the brim with myths and half-truths and outright lies, and in defense of Rockstar and Red Dead, they didn't set out to make a game that accurately portrays the West. They set out to make a game that accurately portrays a Western, and that's a different thing entirely. And to that end, I would say that they succeeded very admirably. I haven't completed my playthrough yet, but the game is gorgeous, the language is fantastic, the story is engrossing and true to the genre, and all of it, really. They just nailed it. And obviously, that's why it's gone on to become one of the most popular games of all time, or certainly of the last few years. But I can't help but think,
Can we get a couple beers, please?
man, that just ain't so. And this, of course, is a drinking show, so I'm mainly going to be talking about that aspect of things here today, though I'll definitely have to touch on a few other points of order just because I got to get it off my chest. So let's talk about those drinks in Red Dead Redemption 2. Oh, that's right. There aren't any. Now, that's not entirely true, because you could drink a beer or straight liquor. And there's an advertisement in a newspaper you can find in-game for a Saint Denis Sazerac, which I'll be making later in this episode, but you can't actually find it to drink in the game as far as I know. And that is wrong. I mean, that is like wildly, that is just wildly inaccurate about the state of affairs here in the 1890s West, okay? It's probably based entirely on mythology that evolved in Hollywood through the mid-20th century, and it's not based on any kind of historical fact. Cocktails at this time, in real life, cocktails would have been everywhere. The Jerry Thomas Bartender's Guide, the cocktail guide from where flows basically all libations, was published in 1862. And that period of time, from the 1860s up to Prohibition, is really regarded as the golden age of cocktails. Bartenders at that time, they were pretty big celebrities. They would have been interviewed by the newspapers and have human interest pieces written about them. Specific bartenders were called out by name as must-see attractions in travelogues at the time, and that's must-see attractions, because the stuff they were doing flair bartending. So they would do these huge, incredible arcs and spin in circles and gouts of juggle fire, I mean, it was like seeing a circus act, in a lot of cases. And in fact, Jerry Thomas's New York bar, The Exchange, was right upstairs from P.T. Barnum's museum. And before you say, but Greg, that might have been true on the East Coast or in New Orleans, this here was the Wild West. Well, I gotta tell you, Jerry Thomas spent much of his career tending bar in Gold Rush, San Francisco, a Wild West town if ever there was. Now, it's true, not every town would have had a well-apportioned saloon that could produce the fanciest of mixed elixirs, but a lot of the towns and saloons you visit in Red Dead Redemption 2 are quite built up and civilized, especially like in Saint Denis, which is a stand-in for New Orleans. Even in saloons that had limited access to necessities, those bartenders would have been coming up with some kind of a mixed drink to entice their customers. Certainly by 1899, the year that Red Dead Redemption 2 takes place in. Everything people needed to make cocktails was in supply. Sugar would have been fairly easy to come by, even in fairly bare-bones settlements. Once a train came in, that's it. It's all bets are off. You've got full-on civilization coming in on the rails very quickly. Even stagecoaches would have been bringing in sugar, so they would have had access to sugar, right? Ice may not have been everywhere, but it was definitely available in all but the most desolate and remote outposts. And I want to emphasize that point. Ice from town to town, maybe this town didn't have ice in it, but probably the next town over did. In addition to the international ice trade, which was at its peak by this time, there was also ice being produced using compressors and ammonia evaporation machines, and that was commercialized as early as 1834. So if the town you're in didn't have ice, the next one over probably did. Fresh citrus was seasonal, but that's what things like oleosaccharides and shrubs are for. Saloon owners had figured out how to preserve and extend the life and utility of their citrus and their fresh ingredients that would have gone bad for like 200 years prior to that. I mean, this was a solved problem basically by 1899. And spirits were everywhere. You could get whiskey and gin. I remember one of the things I think is shocking is that Red Dead Redemption 2 does not have tequila anywhere in the game. I mean, what? Everything people needed to make cocktails was in supply, and they did. But what did they make right after this? I love coffee, and can't really seem to get enough of the stuff, so I gotta thank Trade for sponsoring this episode and feeding my need for more coffee. Trade will help you discover new coffee from the nation's best coffee roasters by matching you to your own personal selection and delivering it right to your door, which is really important for me because before Trade, it seems like I was always forgetting to swing by my local roasters to pick up more coffee before I would run out, and that'll lead to some rough mornings, some very unpleasant, very hectic mornings. They've got a very simple 3-step process to make this happen. First, you go to their website and answer a very short quiz about what things you like in coffee. Then choose when you want that coffee to arrive and how often. And then finally, when the coffee shows up, you tell them how you liked it. They're going to guarantee the first shipment, and so if you don't like it, they will send you something else for free, but it's tough to go wrong. They get it right. Oh, yes. Right now, I'm sipping this Colombian El Bacon from Methodical Coffee. It is a surprisingly fruit-forward coffee. Maybe it's slightly nutty, actually. Kind of reminds me of maraschino liqueur. It's damn fine coffee. So here's the deal. The first 100 HED viewers to click the link below and sign up are going to get 50% off their first bag. You just click the link, take the quiz, and use code HOWTODRINK50 when you do. Shipping will be free. All right, back to the show. No. I ordered the 1890s Roper. Yeah. No, I don't think that is what I got. I don't think so. No, I'd say it's more used car salesman. I think this is Stingray, actually. No, I don't think so. Oh, come on. Really? Okay. All right, fine. No refunds. Okay. Thank you. Sure. Okay, so what drinks did they make in the Wild West? Well, obviously they made old fashions using either sugar or syrup. More commonly syrup, actually, if ice was at hand, despite what you may think otherwise. It's a drink you know and love, and it's basically unchanged since 1899. Another drink that would have been around in 1899, Wild West, is the gin martini. It would have definitely been available by 1899. Probably not made with London dry gin. That might have been out, but you would have found a gin martini that was a 50-50 mix of like Old Tom with dry vermouth and a couple dashes of orange bitters and a lemon peel twist, if you happen to have lemons handy. And yeah, that's a drink that Mr. Arthur Morgan may have enjoyed, as well as the sweet vermouth version, the Martinez. While I'm on gin slings have been enjoyed since the early 1800s. Raffles claims to have invented the Singapore sling in 1915, though I'm pretty sure David Wondrich found evidence of the exact same drink being called a pink sling for at least a decade or two earlier, so why not serve a pink sling, i.e. a Singapore sling, to Dutch, huh? Definitely, I could see a Singapore sling on a steamship in 1899, or something very, very similar to it. Let's go back to whiskey, the mint julep. The mint julep dates to the early 1800s, and mint grows like a weed. Any half-decent saloon owner would have had a little plot of mint growing, outside of their saloon for their use. They would have done that. That's part of the job. There is, of course, the drink that popularized the drinking straw, the sherry cobbler, which dates back to at least the 1820s, and would have been on any number of menus you encounter in Red Dead Redemption 2. The gin and tonic was invented in the early 1800s, and it's not a bad way to cool off in that hot desert sun, would have been available. Punches, which are basically large format cocktails that don't contain bitters but do contain citrus, were enormously popular in the 1700s. By 1899, they've fallen out of a bit of favor, having become passé due to the explosion of popularity of the cocktail, but single-serving rum punches in the form of swizzles would have been around. So you go to Guarma and you don't really have a chance to enjoy a drink in Guarma because you're very busy liberating a plantation's slaves, which is good. Under other conditions, I think you would have found daiquiris there. I think you would have found rum swizzles there. You may not have found a Queen's Park swizzle, but you would have found some kind of a rum swizzle. You would have found rum punches, single-serving rum punches. You would have found daiquiris. I know that there's a story about the daiquiri being invented by an American engineer in 1902, so a couple of years after this game takes place, but there is, I think, no doubt that sugar, lime, and rum and ice were being enjoyed by the locals for years, if not decades, before that guy showed up. So give John Marston a daiquiri, damn it! Okay, you would have had daiquiris in St. Denis. You would have, or something exactly like a daiquiri. Tequila has been made since at least the 1600s, yet there is literally zero tequila in Red Dead Redemption 2, which is doubly weird when you consider that 1 in 3 cowboys in the Wild West were actually vaqueros from Mexico. They kind of invented the whole cowboy thing, actually. Pretty sure the origins of the word vacaro is a mangling of vacaro. And I would also be further remiss if I didn't take this moment to point out that estimates currently suggest that 1 in 4 cowboys were black. So the idea that it is a very white guy thing is a bit of revisionist history. It kind of makes cowboy superhero John Wayne's comments in that infamous 1971 interview all the more absurd. I mean, I guess he just was drinking his own Kool-Aid. He was buying into his own mythology. He was just perpetuating a lot of bullshit. That's what he was doing. You know, if you're noticing a trend here, it's that there should have been cocktails everywhere in Red Dead Redemption 2. They would be ubiquitous. I've had a few comments over the years asking me for a Drinks of the Wild West episode, and I've always been resistant because basically all classic cocktails are drinks of the Wild West, which is why this whole section of this episode has basically been a clip show of early HTD episodes. So the lack of cocktails in Red Dead Redemption 2 is just dead wrong. The drinks should have been everywhere. The thing that shouldn't have been everywhere? Guns, actually. Not to get on too deep a tangent here, but gun control in the supposedly Wild West was a very big deal and extremely important to the function of society. All your favorite rootin' tootin' Wild West towns like Deadwood and Tombstone and Dodge City and on and on and on and on had signs posted all over the outskirts of town that carrying weapons was prohibited and that your first stop coming into town needed to either be at a sheriff office or a hotel to have your firearms secured in a safe. I'm not exaggerating. The gunfight at the OK Corral, the one where Wyatt Earp's legend was solidified in Tombstone, Arizona, was fought over a group of fellas refusing to disarm inside of city limits. So all this hip shooter, gunfighter, Wild West stuff is mythology and lies. You know, another thing that's missing from Red Dead Redemption 2 is ice cream. People love that stuff. It's generally a great business to get into. And in recounting the events of the gunfight at the OK Corral, Wyatt referenced passing his favorite ice cream parlor on his way to the showdown. So in Tombstone, Arizona, 1881, there were enough ice cream parlors in operation that Wyatt Earp had a favorite picked out. So this whole idea of it being an untamed, uncivilized, wild place, well, one, not really all that true. And I wonder too if it might be to justify some of the stuff that we got up to out there on the frontier. You know, well, it was a wild time. You know, things were different. Now, I mentioned earlier that even though the game doesn't give you a chance to drink it, it does give you a recipe for a Saint Denis Sazerac. So, they're gonna make the Saint Denis Sazerac. I'm gonna use the exact instructions from the newspaper. It is essentially a Sazerac. First step is we're gonna do an Absinthe Rinse. I am using St. George's Absinthe Verde. I like this one a lot. I poured a little in there. Gonna coat the inside of my glass pretty well and just pour off the rest directly onto the floor. And per our newspaper, we need to fill this up with crushed ice and just let it sit to chill. So, in my mixing glass, I'm gonna start with a sugar cube. Now, these are demerara sugar cubes. I'm splitting hairs here. I just know that one of the big things with using demerara sugar over white, that why is it done, is, well, because it's a little closer to the sugar that would have been available in 1899. Sugar on a cone, like, for example, is where most of their sugar was made. You had to cut it with special scissors. It was like a totally different stuff. It had much more molasses in it. Start with 1 sugar cube in my mixing glass. There it is. The newspaper recipe calls for 2 dashes of whatever bitters your local pharmacy is making, which I love because that's accurate, that's right. But the drink we traditionally call a Sazerac calls for Peychauds, and as a result, I'm a bit torn. If I'm making a Saint Denis, should I specifically be using something other than Peychauds to set it aside? I think probably that's right. So let's make this one with Bogarts Bitters, which is a very rustic and revived old-timey bitters recipe from the Bitter Truth. It comes in this very appropriate $18.99 bottle. A couple different ways you can do that. You could pour some into a dasher bottle, or if you have dasher tops like this, which we'll put a link to those in the Amazon links below, you can just put that on there. And so we want to add 2 dashes of this to our sugar cube. 1, 2. The Saint Denis Sazerac specifically calls for Cognac. The Sazerac, the earlier recipe and formulations for it does call for Cognac, so that's another thing that's, I think, historically accurate. So let's make this 2 ounces of Cognac into my mixing glass. Now, I'm gonna break up that sugar cube to help it get started dissolving before we add ice to this. So I'm gonna add, and so it's already fallen apart, that's great. It won't dissolve into the Cognac very well at all, but that's okay, we're gonna add ice to it in a second. And now I'm gonna crack some ice in there. And we're just gonna stir that up really well. We don't need to, like, oh, that's part of its charm. You wanna leave some of that that sugar undissolved. Don't worry, no matter how hard I try, we will not successfully dissolve all of it. There'll still be plenty of grains in there. Now we're gonna toss out the ice from our first glass. It's thoroughly chilled. And strain our Saint Denis back into it. Neat, even though it's in an old fashioned. And now I will peel a lemon over it and give that a twist. Drop it right in there. And there we have a Saint Denis Sazerac. Now, before I get into this sipping, let me just do a little bit of background on the Sazerac. The Sazerac is a drink that is very closely associated with the city of New Orleans. It's supposedly a drink that was invented there. And I know I'm about to have an entire city coming for me, but that's also not really true. The Sazerac is just really a name for an improved whiskey cocktail, which can be made a few different ways, typically with a little maraschino, but the New Orleans variety also fits the mold. According to Wondrich, even that name wasn't unique. Other places also were calling their improved whiskey cocktails a Sazerac. And really any cocktail, and by that I mean old-fashioned, so gin, rum, etc., could have been improved using the same kind of improvement formula. I made a drink a while ago called an improved whiskey cocktail. It's a 1860s, 1890s kind of drink. Specifically would have definitely been served in the Wild West, and it's pretty close to a Sazerac. Woo! I think that if you're going to use the sugar cube and not simple syrup, you really should just build it in the glass you're drinking it in, because this is unsweetened. This is extremely dry, tasty, if you like cognac, bitters, and lemon rather. But that's what it tastes like. This is basically cold, neat spirits with a little bit of water, so it's a little bit watered down, but it is bitters dominant. It's a bitter drink. It is earthy, lemony, cognac-y. The cognac tastes essentially slightly like very unsweet raisins, and lemon. The lemon is pretty dominant as well. Just that twist of lemon does a lot as far as the flavor here goes. It is dry, non-sweet raisins. That's what it tastes like. It's a stiff drink. It is strong, and yeah, not too bad, actually. I kind of like it. It has a nice little evolution. I think it could be a little sweeter. I think having it just be a touch sweeter would have made a big difference here. I made a Sazerac on HCD a long while back, and I used, quote, the wrong ingredients. I didn't use Peychaud's, basically. And to rectify that, I'll do a proper Sazerac so I can compare it to the Saint Denis. Okay, so let's talk about how I would make a Sazerac if I'm making one myself. This is gonna be like New Orleans style. So first off, I'm not gonna do the Absinthe Rinse first. I will do a rinse, but I'm gonna do the ice first. Okay, so I'm gonna just crack a big cube here. Just let that chill my glass. We're just gonna let that chill in my glass. If you want, you can give it a little stir, it kind of helps it, but it's got plenty of time to do its job. Next, we're gonna start here with some simple syrup in our mixing glass. Why not a sugar cube, like the book says? Well, I mean, frankly, it didn't get into my drink at all. It didn't dissolve. There's really no amount of stirring that's going to get that in there. I would do, this is my own personal taste. I'm gonna do 2 bar spoons, because I do kind of like my drinks a little sweet. And that's still not very much sugar, right? That's pretty light. So I'm gonna do 2 bar spoons of sugar. I did this one with the Bogarts Bitters. Okay, sure. You get why I did that. But I really do think that Peychaud's is really the key thing with the Sazerac, and I stand by that. It has its own unique flavor. I think it's really important to this drink. So I'm gonna do 2 dashes. I've heard that a lot of people go even more. I've also heard that people do a split of Peychaud's and Ango. It's not a crazy idea to do 2 of each, but I'm gonna let this one just be Peychaud's. I'm just gonna do Peychaud's on its own. You can always do that kind of a drink, you know, if you wanted to throw some Angostura in there. So, cognac versus rye. I gotta say, if I'm gonna make my Sazerac, I'm gonna go with the rye. So we're gonna put in 2 ounces of rye. I'm using an old Forester Rye. By the way, these bottles that I'm using here, available with Curiata. If you are looking to get some bottles shipped to your home, so you can follow along with what I'm making on the show, drink.curiata.com can help you out, probably, if you live in the United States of America. It serves about 70 or 80% of the US population currently. They should have this Pierre Ferrand 1840 cognac as well. This, by the way, Pierre Ferrand made this with the kind of help from David Wondrich to make a cognac that would have been appropriate to 1840, 1899, that style of cognac. It's the right stuff. So, we got our bitters, we got our spirit, we got our simple. We're ready at this point for some ice. I'm gonna crack some ice in here. Give it a stir. Now, I don't need to stir as aggressively or as long because I've already got my sugars dissolved because I'm using a syrup instead of a granulated sugar. Perfect. I'm gonna let that sit. Now I'm gonna empty the ice out of this. I'm gonna hit that with a little St. George absinthe, available via Curiata. Swirl that around in there. Great, and then that's perfect. And now we'll strain our drink into a glass. Take a lemon twist, give that a little whoof. There we go, beautiful, big and oily. Drop it in. And this is a Sazerac, or a New Orleans Sazerac, right alongside your Saint Denis. I have a funny feeling I'm gonna like this one a little bit better. I don't like that one a lot better. A lot more flavor here. Ooh. The absinthe is way more present. It's enough that it really clears and opens up your nose and sinuses. There is a little bit, and I know you guys think I'm crazy, there's a little bit of anise flavor, I think I get at least in Coca-Cola. The absinthe and the Peychauds kind of conspire to taste a bit like the nasty bitter parts of Coca-Cola, which in this cocktail is wonderful. There are cherry notes in there. That old Forester has some real cherry flavors to it. It is just barely balanced with the sugar. I mean, only less would be a little undersweetened. You know, if you compare it, it's dry. That's real bone dry. Not bad though. This is chocolatier in a way. It sounds crazy, but this is a little more cherry. Lemony, certainly lemon nose from that. The lemon is present. I mean, you get a lot of lemon off of a little twist of good lemon peel like that. This is a complicated and wonderful and delicious cocktail. With a sugar cube, you would not have gotten as consistent a balancing. It's less predictable. Even a bar spoon, it's not a very accurate measurement. It's just a bar spoon's a bar spoon, right? But it's at least consistent. I know I'm adding something that whatever I add will end up in the drink. Whereas when you work with a sugar cube, you know, those granulate, if you have grains of sugar sitting on the bottom of a cocktail, you're really not getting them until you eat them. They don't really do much to the drink. And in the way that the Saint Denis Sazerac was described in the game, we didn't even get sugar to move from our mixing glass into our drinking glass. So, you know, I strongly encourage you to use a syrup. I just do. I think it's better. I think that most bartenders of the time and age would have been using a syrup, by the way. All right, well, so today I talked about the drinks that should have been in Red Dead Redemption 2, and then I made the one drink that showed up in it. I wasn't really thrilled with it. Then I showed you how to make a proper Sazerac, and those are the drinks of Red Dead Redemption. I've been playing Red Dead Redemption 2 a little bit on Twitch. You might catch me there at twitch.tv/GregFromHTD. I am on Twitter at How to Drink. I'm on Instagram at How to Drink. I have a Patreon at patreon.com/howtodrink. The bottles I used in this episode are going to be available at drink.curiata.com, or you can find these bottles available via Curiata using the link in the pinned comment below. Well, partners, I'll be back mighty soon with another episode of HTD, and in the meantime, why don't you feast your eyes upon these used discount episodes of HTD? Why, I've got so many episodes, I'm giving them away. They say, Greg, what are you doing? You're crazy giving those episodes away. I say, I know, but the people need the episodes. I gotta cut my prices. Your prices are too low. I says, I gotta lower the prices so that everybody can afford them. Oh God, I just look like Boss Hoss, don't I? I'm gonna kill that son of a bitch.